The term interstitial, when used broadly, means a space between structures or objects. When applied to crystalline structures, for example, it can refer to an atomic impurity that allows the structure itself to store more energy because it increases the surface area of an otherwise symmetrical lattice. But it can also soften an otherwise strong structure, as is the case with an interstitial impurity in a face-centric cubic, or FCC, lattice, which is a crystalline structure that takes the shape of a cube. It's symmetrical, and that symmetrical structure is weakened by the presence of this atomic anomaly, rather than strengthened by it. An interstitial fluid is the solution between tissue cells of a multicellular organism. So think plasma in a human being or another mammal. That's an example of an interstitial fluid. Interstitial art is a term applied to artwork that falls outside of normal titular boundaries. Something that's not quite impressionistic but not quite expressionistic, for example. This could also apply to a work of fiction that isn't quite science fiction, not quite romance, not quite mystery. So it's very hard to shelve. It exists in between these well-established genres. Interstitial space in architecture refers to rooms or even entire floors that exist between those that are used by human beings, typically. And so these rooms or additional floors are used to store mechanical systems and machinery. So it could be a closet where you keep the water heater, or it could be an entire additional floor that's maybe just a few feet tall, where there are air ducts and where there are various electrical equipment and things of that nature. The way that I'm using the term is in the media sense, though, in particular the television sense. An interstitial program typically refers to a piece of shorter programming that is presented in between more standard-sized shows. So this could be like a 5-minute cartoon short that is in between two larger 30-minute cartoon shows. Or it could be some kind of station-centric branding or programming that promotes the larger body of work for the network. And so the typical Let's Know Things podcast format doesn't allow for a lot of non-topic related info. There's a lot of really weird info thrown in that I can draw lines between these different subjects and include them because I think that stuff is neat. But talking about the show itself doesn't typically fit in very well. And so I wanted to do this bonus episode, if you want to call it that, though it's not a typical episode at all, to talk real quick about the podcast itself, kind of where it's going, some things that are coming up, and to answer some questions that have come in thus far. And if this format proves interesting and valuable, then I'll probably do them more regularly, but otherwise it'll be a really rare thing. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the next episode, and the next episode is entitled Click. And it has to do with the online economy, with a particular focus for part of the episode on the online advertising economy. And I wanted to do this because I will be, for this show, introducing quote-unquote advertisements, sponsorships, which you'll learn a little bit of the difference between the two, or at least the perceived difference between the two on the episode. And I wanted to make sure I didn't just hit you guys over the head with that. I wanted to be able to explain that broader context, since that's what this show is about to begin with. But the idea here is that I wanted to take this project to the next level. It's something that I kind of do in my free time right now, and I'd like to be able to focus more on it, and that requires that I'm able to make some money from it. But at the same time, I didn't want to dilute it, and I didn't want to ruin it in the way that a lot of cool things get ruined, both for the people consuming it and for the people making it. And there's a lot of things that annoy me about advertisements and sponsorships and all the different ways of making money online and offline. And I didn't want to fall into that trap. And so I've been thinking long and hard about this. I've had some opportunities come my way already that were not good fits. They were good fits in that they could have made me money, not good fits in that I felt like I would have been annoying anybody listening to the podcast with the details of this opportunity and the product or service that was being offered. And so I didn't want to do that. I am somebody that uses an ad blocker when I browse the internet, and I am somebody who typically, with a lot of podcasts, feel that sponsorship messages work quite a bit better when they are personalized, when they're customized, when they're intentional, rather than them just coming across as, here's someone who gave me money. So that is the approach that I'll be taking. A very intentional approach to sponsorship messages. I'm going to do my utmost to make them interesting and relevant. The first two companies that I'll be talking about, which you'll hear on the next episode, are companies that I reached out to specifically because I wanted to work with them, because I already love their stuff and I already recommend them to people constantly. And they basically said, hey, okay, cool. Send people our way and we'll give you X amount of dollars every time somebody signs up or every time somebody becomes a customer. And I felt that that was a pretty good deal. And I also felt that these were things that I could talk about in the broader context and present, hopefully, even for people who these ads don't directly apply to, provide some other benefit. And you'll see what I mean by that next episode at the end of the episode. I'm also going to make sure, if you've ever looked at my recommendations page on Colin.io, you'll know how I feel about this already, but I tend to be a minimalist, which means that I don't believe that you need things to be complete. I think that you can buy things that add to your life, but in general, you should focus on just the important stuff and not buy things just to buy things. And so my caveat, and this will be something that I say quite often when talking about sponsors on the various episodes, I don't think that you need to buy anything or should buy things just to buy them. And that includes signing up for services. When I present something, if it is something that is relevant and interesting to you, that would be wonderful. And if it's something that will add to your life, that would be great. It's a good way for you to get this thing that I recommend and a great way to help out the show and the trade-off. But I do not encourage anyone to just go buy stuff to buy stuff. That is very counter to my philosophy and very counter to people being happy in general, I think. That will help shape the sponsorship methodology of this show. Another quick thing that I want to talk about is how the show has been doing. We are coming up to the 10th episode, and already the show has been in the top 10 for news and politics on iTunes. I think it got up to number 5 or 6, and it got in the top 100 of all podcasts on iTunes. I think it got into the low 70s, which was totally not something I would have even thought to hope for. That was absolutely amazing and ridiculous. The show was on the front page of iTunes, of the iTunes podcast section, under new and noteworthy for several weeks. It was really, really crazy, and big thanks to everybody who has been reviewing and rating the show, who's been sharing it with their friends, who's been gabbing about it enthusiastically on social media. That is wonderful. I see all of that. Thank you so much for that. It always brings a great big smile to my face. I didn't start this show to get accolades or numbers. I kind of thought it would take a whole lot longer to get to this point where we have about 10,000 downloads each episode. But the fact that it hasn't taken longer opens up a whole lot of opportunities and has opened up this opportunity where I can start focusing more time and energy on it. So thank you very much for helping the show get to that point, and I cannot wait to double down on this and see what happens next. Another huge thanks to people who have been contributing to the show in other ways. The sharing and the reviews and ratings, that helps immensely. And so does the giving directly, either by purchasing one of my books or by contributing $1 a show. That has been absolutely incredible. That is kind of a long-term strategy in that I want to make sure that this is a diversified show in how it's being funded. And a lot of my favorite podcasters, once they get big, they are able to go completely sponsorship free because they are completely supported by the audience. And that to me is something that is really appealing on multiple levels. So thank you guys so much for already helping out. That additional money comes in very handy every month. That helps me turn my attention more toward this. But it's also something that, again, makes me smile. It's just the fact that you guys are geeking out with me in this way and enjoying it enough to pay money for something on the internet. That is something that I'm just blown away by. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to answer a couple of quick questions. If you'd like to ask me a question about the show, I might answer you directly. I might answer it on a future interstitial. I might do both. You can contact me by going to colin.io/contact, and there you'll find my email address, you'll find my snail mail address, and you will also find a link to all of my social media accounts. But the questions I'll answer today: where do you get your news and information? Is a big one that I get a lot. And frankly, there is no simple answer to this. I have a bookmark folder on my browser that has something like 50 different sites on it. And some of them are aggregators themselves, and some of them are direct journalistic news sites like The Guardian and The Atlantic. But what I try to do, and what to me seems the most intentional way to get your news today, with so many news organizations kind of going out so many different directions and being really pulled in different directions by the necessity to earn money through acquiring more clicks, which is something I'll talk about in the next episode quite a bit, is to get your news from a lot of different sources. And that way, rather than hearing something from just one source with one set of biases and opinions and one set of journalists, and in some cases, one set of facts, you can hear it from multiple different standpoints in multiple directions. And that, more than anything else that I've discovered, tends to balance out the bias and the prejudice that you find in journalism today. And I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with bias in the press. It's something that you can never totally get rid of. Even when you're just reporting statistics, you choose which statistics to report. So there's inherent bias in all data that we take in. And this is the best way that I've found to filter for that bias. Some of the sites that I follow and some of the Twitter accounts that I follow, Twitter is also a huge thing for me in terms of getting my news, because then people who are smarter about certain things than I am can show me where to go and show me the legit sources to be watching. But comparing these different sources and comparing stuff from the extreme ends of the spectrum, but also a lot of different intelligent people in the middle, seems to be the best way to filter that. That's where I tend to get my news and information. It's a combination of an amalgamation of a bunch of different websites, dozens of different sites, and then a few very intentionally chosen people on Twitter. And you can see who I follow on Twitter if you just go to twitter.com/Colin is my name. There are very few people that I follow, you'll see. The next question: what kind of setup are you using to record the podcast? If you want to see a lot of different stuff that I use in terms of travel, in terms of work in general, but also in terms of video and audio production, you can go to colin.io/recommendations. But the quick answer to this is that I am using a Rode Podcaster mic. I'm using a cheap pop filter off of Amazon. I'm using the shock mount and I don't know what it's called, like a microphone arm, one of those crazy impressive looking microphone arms that was also made by Rode for the Podcaster mic. And I'm using Adobe Audition to produce. I record directly into Adobe Audition, and then I produce the show there and export it from there. And that's it. I wanted to keep this thing as minimal as possible. First, because I knew that the first choices I made would probably not be the ones that I would want to keep forever once I got further into this thing, if I wanted to commit more to it. So I may upgrade this setup at the moment. A lot of people who I respect, whose opinions I asked for ahead of time, recommend something similar to this. Some people go even simpler and use something like Audacity or GarageBand instead of something more complex like Audition. So there's a lot of different directions that you can go with this. But for me, and for a setup that cost a few $100s to start up and get going, this seemed like the best combination of elements. It also appealed to me that for the spaces where I usually record, they're not pure studio spaces, and so they're not very quiet. I'm in a basement in the Midwest right now, and so essentially half the time I'm trying to record, you can hear like lawnmowers and such in the background, and I have to edit all that out. And so this mic I picked in particular because it's really good at filtering out everything that is not right next to your mouth, that's not like an inch away. And then finally, this is a question that I get some version of almost every day since I started this podcast. But even with my YouTube stuff and all the interviews that I find myself doing all the time, some version of what's with the vocal fry? What's with the gravelly voice? What are you trying to do, like an NPR voice or something? And this is my normal voice. Frankly, I'm not a huge fan of my voice. And some people do like it. They like the lower tones. Some people, it really bugs them like nails on a chalkboard. It's hard for me to differentiate and pay attention except for what people tell me, because as you know, if you've ever heard your own voice on like an answering machine message, it sounds weird to you no matter what. So my voice sounds weird to me no matter what. I have been looking into this. I still am not super certain about how to alleviate or deal with or make less annoying a vocal fry. But it is something that as I double down on this project, I'll be looking into. It might be something where I finally splurge and take voice lessons or something so that I can figure out how to maintain what makes me with my voice, but maybe alleviate some bad habits that I have, which I'm sure I do. I really don't want to be speaking in a way that will prevent me from speaking once I get older. So if I'm doing something wrong in terms of technique, that is something I'll definitely try to work on. And to the handful of people or so who have told me that my voice helps put them to sleep, you're welcome, I guess. Maybe that's a side business I should be considering. Thank you in either case for listening and suffering through or enjoying my intonation and diction. So I think I'll go ahead and stop there. These shows, these episodes, these interstitials are going to be a lot shorter. And again, I don't know how often I'll do them. You'll have to tell me if you thought this was useful and interesting or not. I will not be offended if you choose to skip the interstitials and instead focus your attention on the more standard episodes. That's totally cool. But I wanted to let you guys know what was happening. One, so that you wouldn't be caught off guard with the upcoming sponsored messages that will be on the standard episodes. And two, so that I could tell you some things about the show, how it's going, do a direct thank you, and answer a few questions that have arisen frequently since I started the show. So thank you again very much for everything. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for supporting me and this project. And I hope you enjoy the upcoming episode, which is entitled Click.